Welcome to Mitch Step Podcast, where we discuss entrepreneurship, industry trends, and the occasional book review. Remember the days when you first started coding, the frustration, like endless debugging? Nowadays, programmers have it easy, and they have these programming sidekicks that can help them with debugging, learning new information, or writing the code for you. We're going to talk about Cursor AI, which is a fork of VS Code. And if you're not familiar with any of these topics, that's fine. I'll go over them. So you won't be lost if you are new to programming. But it is an interesting topic. And if you aren't familiar with programming, I think that you should stay and listen in. Okay, so for today's agenda, we're going to be going over Cursor AI. Cursor AI is supposedly a groundbreaking AI-powered editor, which is a fork of VS Code. And we're going to delve into the capabilities of Cursor AI and discuss the potential impact on software development and just share my personal experience of Cursor AI, because I built an app that I'll show you today in GoLang and Java. So we'll go over that. But before we dive in, I'm your host, Dalton Anderson. My background is a bit of a mix of programming, data science, and insurance. Offline, you might find me running, building my side business, or lost in a good book. You can listen to the podcast in both video and audio format on YouTube. If audio is more your thing, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Okay, so now we're going to go into what is Cursor AI as promised. So Cursor AI is a fork of VS Code with enhanced AI capabilities. What is a fork if you're not familiar with a fork? A fork is a coding term where, without getting too technical, there's this language called Git, which is used for version management. And if you have a repository of code, so think about it as like, I don't know, all your patents for your architecture, your architectural blueprint of your house or something. Like, you got a custom made house and you had an architectural firm and contractors, they drafted up the blueprints, all that stuff. And then you published it online, open sourced it to everyone. Everyone could use it for free. They don't have to pay for it. It's fine. So say that your friend comes along, likes the house, but doesn't really like some of the additions that you have, and maybe wants to downsize, or maybe another friend has a completely different approach on something that you did, and that would be a fork. So they're not necessarily converging into like a centralized architectural blueprint. They are completely different versions, but they came from your open sourced architectural blueprint. So if you think about the house, think about now all the code for VS Code is open sourced. And so what Cursor did was they forked VS Code at a certain point, and they kind of built their own VS Code with all these AI capabilities on top of it. So it's basically VS Code with AI capabilities. But that's what a fork is, in a non-technical manner. And so I think it has like an intuitive interface where it kind of has a corner panel that could pop out on the right side if you want to have a chat. If you're similar, if you've used, it's similar to ChatGPT's, OpenAI's ChatGPT, or Google's Gemini, or Anthropic's Claude, where there's a corner panel that will open up, or that corner panel is similar to what you would see on those websites and that functionality. But one thing that's a little different is you could switch on the fly which model you want to use with premium. I think it's open to just premium users. I think you can use certain models like the non-premium OpenAI or like the non-premium Gemini models. But when you have Cursor Premium, you're open to whatever model you really want. You can add your own models. You can add your API keys for, say you have an OpenAI API key or a Claude API key or a Gemini API key. You would be able to utilize your keys within Cursor, which I think is pretty cool. So there's a wide range of model offerings. So you could switch if you're having trouble with one model or a new model, you like the new updates of that model, you could switch to that model. And then there's a feature in the settings where you could add models. I didn't play around with that because there's plenty. I mean, there's like 15 in there. So I didn't really think I needed to add some niche model. It has all the foundational models. It has pretty much everything you would need. And as I said, it allows you to add your own API keys, which I think is pretty cool. One thing that is different than, say, and I think this question might be coming up with you as a listener right now is, okay, then what's the difference with me just taking my code and sending it over to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Meta's Llama? Well, now with Cursor AI being basically the intermediary between the foundational models and your code base, it uses your code base as a source of information. So when you ask a question, your code is used as context. And you can specify, okay, I want to use information from the web. I want to use these following files within my app or my program, whatever you're making. And then from there, it would combine all that information, and then the foundational model that you're using, most likely a foundational model, has that additional context where it could serve you in, I would say, an expedited manner and without you having to answer a whole bunch of questions, because it could answer its own questions because you already provided all the information it needs. So it's like, oh, well, I want to do XYZ, and you sending your instructions that you have. And so instead of the model saying, okay, what do you have on line 4? And then you tell the model, oh, I have this. And then the model's like, oh, I think it should be that. What about line 7? And so there's not like this like back and forth between the user and the model. The model already knows what you have, so the model can make the changes appropriately. And then it gives you kind of like the suggestions of what it thinks, and then you can accept them. There's settings where you could do line by line, which I think would be better in a larger code base. For me, I think it was kind of annoying because I already knew what I wanted to do, and the code it's not that much. But I think for a massive code base, I think it's important to go through and look at every change line by line and accept them. For me, I think that you should have that setting enabled. But if you have that setting enabled, you should be able to accept all changes. I think that would be decent. I didn't see capabilities to do that when I was using Cursor, maybe like 3 hours ago, but I am in Korea, so I might get less features than someone who is in the US or something like that. Okay. So I went over what is a fork, what is Cursor AI, and I talked about like why is Cursor different than these other approaches. And I think for VS Code for Copilot versus Cursor, I think the big thing is like adding the context of selecting which files you can add from files, you can add from your terminal, you can add from the web, you could add documents outside of the project, which I think is interesting. There's quite a few options to add context, and that's one of the biggest things when you're asking these models for help is you need to provide the context. And if they have the context, then you don't really need to do anything. Like you could just ask a question, but to set up the context a lot of times in these chats, that's the most time consuming thing. And then afterwards, it's really smooth. So to remove like 75% of the work on the front end, it's a lot. I would say your productivity increases, and I would say that the user experience is smoother. Yeah, that's how I feel. Okay, so what I did with Cursor, and this I'm going to talk about the app, and I'll show you the app. What I did with Cursor is I built a GoLang or GoLang, however you want to go about it, GoLang app with Java. So the back end is Go, and then the front end is Java. And so I set up some, and I didn't really do it. That was more AI. But basically, we have the Java piece is like a command line JavaScript and it has the front end ish, but the front end is command line inference. And so you have the command line and you're putting in your inputs in the command line. And then I'm storing this JSON file, and then Go is bringing it back and displaying on my local host. And so I'm using the Java front end, Go back end. The front end interacts with the back end via RESTful API. And then the way that I'm saving the data is I'm using a JSON file. So the data is persistent. So if you logged out, you don't really log out. I mean, you close out the file, then open it back up and rerun your instance. You have to run the Go backend on a different terminal. And then the Java front end is run on an additional terminal. So there's two separate terminals because they're interacting with each other. So they both need to be live to work. Well, if you want to update the back end, you have to have the front end live. So they don't necessarily be live at the same time, but yeah, makes sense. Okay, so I use Cursor, and I think that this would be very difficult for me to do myself because this is my first Go project. I don't know Go. And so I think the whole process took me about 4 hours. But you got to keep that in mind. Like I had to set up my computer, so that if you're not familiar with programming, that involves me like setting up these directories, downloading these files off the internet, getting them formatted correctly, like however your computer wants them to be. They've got to be stored in certain spots, and if they're stored in like the wrong spot, then you got to fix it. It's sometimes time consuming. Go is smoothish. I think the biggest issue that I had was originally I had everything put together on my documents folder. And then when I was creating everything for the app, I had to like make a directory, like using the terminal. It's a lot easier because in the terminal, create some of these files like a template HTML, a template CSS. It creates you use these like little like commands in the command line prompt, which is like this terminal. It's the little black and white screen sometimes you see sometimes on your computer when you're downloading stuff. And there's different scripts that you could put in there or commands that would like clean up your files and put the template files together and like compile these like certain files like your go.sum, your go.mod. And so I was doing that with the terminal, and then I was like, hold on, I have files that I had on my directory that I created via terminal, and then I had files from my original creation, which was in the documents. And then Cursor was getting confused on like which file to use. And then I didn't realize because they were all named the same file. I was like, oh my goodness, we have these two files that I'm trying to edit, but Cursor's editing the other file. Like it's using the other file as the source. And then it wasn't seeing the issue with the current file. And that was a bit, I was a bit tired when I was doing all that. So it took me a little bit to realize, like after like 8 minutes, I was like, what's going on here? And I just did a whole stop, and I was like, okay, it seems like there's some confusion between two different files. Let me close out of these files. But one of the issues with Cursor, I think, is when you have a file open and you used it in the chat, even though it's a problem and not a problem at the same time, but it was a problem for me at the time because I wasn't familiar. When you close out a file and you're not using it anymore, it will still use that file. So you have to be careful because I thought, and it was difficult for me to tell because it doesn't show the full file path in Cursor, which I think they should start to. I closed out those old files that weren't part of the directory, but then I still had the chat open, and the chat was still using the old files when I was really trying to edit the new files that were part of the directory. And it took me some time to figure that out, that, hey, even though I closed the file, it's still using the old files that I don't want to use anymore, which was a bummer for sure. But we figured it out, and now I know now I know not to do that. So I I think that would be painful to navigate again if you had to do that. So just keep that in mind. Set it up once. Don't do two projects, and things would be a lot less confusing for you. And another thing is, like, this is the first time I've used Go, and I'm like okay at Java, but I'm definitely no expert and stuff like that. Like I'm more on the data science side and like analytics than I am development. I would say like I'm like okay developer. Definitely no expert. I've done more stuff with C# than I have with Go. I haven't done anything with Go, but I've built some websites, some API stuff with Go, or not Go, C#, sorry. But with Go, I haven't built anything. So it was just a completely new world to be in. So that was quite interesting. So I honestly don't think that I would be able to complete this project, definitely not in 4 hours, without the help of Cursor. Like Cursor really made it possible. And the way that I went about it is I set up a chat on Gemini, and I said, hey, and this is a good thing to do. I'll set up a podcast to talk about it, and maybe I'll do some testing of different ways of going about it. But if you set up a chat and you give your chat a role, like, hey, you're a senior developer, and for 20 years, and you program in Go in various languages, but your primary language is Go. I want you to use XYZ, like coding methodologies, to make sure you have clean, concise code. And then I want, the format of the structure of the project and with comments. And then you can ask that chat, okay, can you make me some simple apps for me? And then it will do that. But you could also use this methodology for your work or something like that. You'd be like, you are, the foremost senior expert in content creation. Write me the best captions for this video or this image, and it will do a good job. Like I think AI really likes role playing, and so if you give it a role, it will do great, and so it will definitely improve. Like that level of prompt engineering will help you out with your outputs. But I don't want to get derailed here. So I'm going to go and share the app. Let's see, share my screen. Alrighty. So we'll go over the code briefly. Why can't I share this screen? No. Okay, this works. Sorry, I had a cough. Okay, so here we are. We have this to-do app. So if we go over here, this is kind of our file directory, our app directory. So the app, we have this, the app is called to-do app.go, hyphen dot, to-do hyphen app.go if you want to get really, really granular. And then there's a folder called backend, and then backend we have main.go. And then our front end folder, that's part of the app, is called to-do app.java. Okay, simple enough. So if you go over to the to-do app.java, it has all of the different types of APIs that you can hit, and and also, how are you going to add and remove tasks. So it makes this like system in, system out print of the tasks that you create. And then you could switch between different tasks. It's pretty simple. And then it has the URL, and you add that in, and then you will push your tasks over to Go into the JSON file, and then Go will pick it up. And if you go and look at the JSON file, we already have 3 tasks in here. So we have a test task, we have build simple to-do app for podcast episode using Cursor. Look into the new AI posts on X. I get a lot of my, I wouldn't say news. I think people will cringe if I say news, but I do get a lot of my information regarding tech and life, I would say, potentially, like books to read, influencing tweets, I would say, like tweets that I think are impactful. definitely get that from X pretty often. Okay, so now let's transition over to go.main. Okay, so go.main, there's go.sum, which has all of the GitHub versions and stuff, and then go.mod has all the requirements. But if you go to go.main, you see how we have what the structure of the JSON file look like. It's got these three things: description, completed, blah, blah, blah. Have the function regarding to the task. And then if you see right here, it has the API routes. So we have the get, we got the post, we got the pull, we got the delete. Pretty simple. And we're routing that all to our local host, which is our localhost 8080. Pretty typical stuff. But basically after that point, you have to set up a terminal. So this terminal right here it's running. And so it says over here, let's see. So the command to run the app is go run main.go. If you had a lot of dependent files, you would use go build or go run space dot. I only have one file, so I'm not necessarily running a whole bunch of different files that are dependent on each other. I just have one file, the main.go file, and then I have the to-do app.java. So there isn't that code dependency with these they're kind of separate, but like one's the front end, one's the back end. So there isn't many files interacting with each other. They're just singular files on one side of the app and the other side of the app. So with that being said, I can just run this script, which is go run main.go. And so go is the function to call go, and then run tells go the language to run, and then I tell it which file to run. So I'm saying, okay, run GoLang run, like basically I'm telling GoLang to run main.go. I just thought it was funny because there's so many goes in there. And then after that, it will say like, I'm listening. If you say right here, app instance with long recovery, blah, blah, and it will say listening and serving HTTP on localhost 880. And then it shows you all the different posts right here. Okay, so then now we go back over to our other terminal, which is the Java one, which was a pain. I don't know why I was having so many issues. This is when I was having all the issues with my chat being all messed up. So when you have this Java piece, you can run it with Javac or Java. I think it depends on your setup. I think if you have a class file, you can run it with Javac to do, and then to do app.java is the file in my front end. And so I'm also in the front end directory. So I'm in Dalton Anderson /to do hyphen app /for front end. And then it's Javax to do app.java. And that doesn't work because I don't have a class file, I'm pretty sure. I'm definitely not an expert, but the piece that does work is the Java to do app. So now I'm in the app, so you could choose your actions of what you want to do. So we're going to choose an action right here. Let's do view tasks. Let's see what tasks we have. What the heck is going on? Let's do this. Exit Java to do app view tasks. All right, right here. Sorry, I was just tripping out. Okay, so yeah, I was working the whole time. I was just, I don't know. I thought it would show up at the bottom, but the issue is like when you put in your request. So I put 1, it puts it at right below your 1, but then it reprints your options. So I thought it wasn't popping up because I'm on the podcast and not really thinking straight. But anyways, so you have our first task ID, description, blah blah, test, completed, false, and then these IDs. So now let's do this. So let's like toggle a task for completion. Enter in the task ID. So we want to complete task 1. All right. So let's view our task again. What's going on here? Oh no. It's frozen. It's frozen live. No way. All right, let's I think we'll kill our terminal and we'll come back. All right, let's try this again. So let's do a new terminal. Let's do change directory. We'll go to our global directory and then we'll change directory and go to our to-do app. Okay, so now we're in our to-do app. Then we're going to change directory in our to-do app to front end. And then we're going to say Java to-do app. All right, we're back. All right, so I'm not going to do that, but we do have. Okay, so it works, but for some reason it froze the terminal. But so we made terminal. We had this test. We had this test task right here. ID 1 was incomplete. Now it's completed. But when I did that, for some reason, it just like completely completed the terminal. So I'm not going to do that again, but we will add a task and we'll say, let's add a task. Well, maybe I could share my screen of my local host first. So I don't know if you could see that. I might have to check. So let's do this share screen, localhost. Yeah, it's a bit easier if I had a better setup right now, but I'm in Korea, but whatever. Okay, so right now you see the website, or not, it's not really the website, but the localhost of the app. You see how it's 1 completed test. Completed is false. We should reload this. It comes back as true right here. So now it was false. Now it's true. And then now I'm going to share again, but I'm going to share the app. We're going to make a task together. And then once I do that, I'm going to refresh this localhost and you'll see the app update, which is pretty cool. All right. So let me go like this. Windows main doc. All right. So we are making a task. Say, create a task live for Venture Step Podcast. All right. So we entered a task. We should be able to. I don't know what's going on here. It's doing it again. This is this is one of those things when you're doing a live demo. This is what can go wrong will go wrong. and I've been messing around with this for a while, and I wasn't having any issues. So it's what it is. It's no big deal. We're going to keep pushing along. It is somewhat normal when you're doing a demo. These things happen for some reason. Okay, so let's refresh, and hopefully that went through. It did not. Okay, so what if I kill the terminal again and then make a new terminal and then do the same thing all over again and change directory to FN app, change directory again into front end java dot to do or space to do app. Okay, so now we're back. So then I'm going to add a task. We're going to say live task while doing adventure step. Adventure step episode. Okay. Now we'll go back. I don't think it's working right now. It's crazy. Okay, so yeah, it's not working. So that's fine. We can talk about, I already showed you it works, so I just wanted to add a new task with you. But it's fine. No big deal. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the functionality within the app, which I think is pretty cool. So let's do this. Let's do right here, main.go. And I have a couple of these already, but if we have a chat, so you can see, you could add the web. This is the main.go file. You could add another file, like we could add our to-do. And this is where I was talking about, it's kind of confusing, is because the to-do app.java, I have many of them, but it doesn't really show you the full file path. So I don't necessarily know which one. I think it's this one, but you can add in these different files, and then let's say main, and then we'll say go sum, where's go sum, and then we'll say our task, and then we'll say to do app, to do app, to do. I think this one will be good. Okay, so I've added in all these different files, and I'm saying, can you please write up documentation of this code, because we have a new hire coming, coming in on Monday or something. I don't know. So I will say, and seeing it real time here, that the queries for Cursor are longer. I'm assuming that they get better pricing, but less priority on queue. And so the queries take a bit longer. This one took a couple seconds to run. So I asked it, hey, like, I have a new hire coming in on Monday. Can you write up some code? So to do API documentation. So it talks about the project structure, the files, the important files, and then you can reply to them and add things if you wanted to change it. Then it talks about the key components of the task structure, which is really simple because it's only 3 things. It goes over the main functions of the app. And so it talks about the main, which is the main.go. Then it talks about the JSON functions, like load task, get task, blah, blah, blah. Then it talks about the API inputs that it has and where they are and what they do. So API task, get API task, receive all tasks, post API task, add a new task, put API task, which would be editing, and then delete. You could delete a task. Data persistence, it goes on where is this file being stored, and then it goes over the concurrency handling, which uses the sync.mutex method, which is a Go method, and it just runs through this file, and it gives an extensive write-up, and it's super useful, not only for this, and you could, if you wanted to make a change to, like, say, a snippet of code, like this task one, and you just press Control K, you'll open up your code editor, or within your code editor, you can make inline edits and say, can you give me some suggestions on how to make this better? All right, so I'm asking, and I see I have Claude 3.5, and so it's adding the created date and then the updated date, which I think is pretty good change, but I'm going to deny it because I don't want to make any changes. Okay, so you can do that. You can also ask it to, if you click on something like this, you click on all the code, you can ask it to refactor your code, which I think is huge. So a lot of times when you write something, like if you're in programming, you kind of do have an initial stab. Like if you're writing a letter, an important letter, or an email, you have that initial email, and then you have that comb through, and you have a comb through. Like if it's super important, like you comb through it a couple times. When you're writing code, it's the same thing, where you just write the code, and then afterwards you go through and you optimize the code, you make it better, you make it clearer. This is what would take hours, you could do in 30 seconds. You just click this button and it refactors the code. And I did that with some code at work, which it helps because you're not spending time on things that don't add value. It adds value, but the value that's being added is mostly when you're coding, but then you have to maintain the code. So that's the next piece, is like, okay, like you're writing code, but not only are you writing code, you're able to maintain the code a lot easier because you could just refactor it, and the refactor will come with the comments. It will optimize the code. It will make it faster. It will make it better, clearer, more concise, everything for you for next to no effort. It's super useful. So those were like the big features. So you could make inline edits. You could generate files. If you ask it to break down something for you, it will. You can ask it to help you create an app. So like when I first created this, there's a different chat. I can't find it, but there was a different chat, and it broke down. Okay, now you need to create a go.main file under this folder. Now you need to have a to-do app.java file under this folder. Then you need an outside file, the to-do-app.go, and then you need to link that all with your direct. Like, it explains everything out for you. You don't need to know the language, which I don't necessarily suggest you make a project where you don't know the language. Well, one thing I do think is really cool about Cursor and the new capabilities that these apps will come out with in years from now is it makes it easy to get started. And like, I think that's the biggest hurdle for people, is like they have these big ideas. They want to learn coding languages, or they want to make something. They want to side hustle. They want to start their own app. They want to leave their company. They have all these wants and ideas. But the issue is like getting started. And it's a daunting task sometimes to learn a new language. It's difficult because you don't want to sit down and grind out hours and hours. This gets you started. You're not going to be an expert. You're not going to write anything complex. You're not going to make some crazy game-changing app with no knowledge, but it will get you started and get you confident and see how the code functions. And then you can have your own little approaches and your own little methodologies, and you could learn by having the Cursor break down the code for you. I think that's invaluable because I think the best way to learn is to do, right? Like you can read as many coding books as you want, or you can read as many leadership books as you want, or entrepreneurship books, or you could listen to as many podcasts as you dream of, but you're not going to get any better unless you actually do the task. And so I like to focus on shipping, which is like a term used in programming, like shipping, like you're just shipping stuff, fast iterations, fast feedback. And those things enable you to learn faster and improve. Because if you say you spend like 8 weeks to make a perfect episode, and I spend 1 week to make an episode. My episode won't be perfect. Your episode might be better. But in that time of you making one episode, I have produced 8. So maybe not every single episode knocks the audience out of the park. And I've had those, right? Like I've had episodes where people said, okay, like this isn't really that good. I had someone say, I would rather watch paint dry. And I was like, hey, I hear you. That wasn't my best episode. I understand. Hopefully next week I'll produce something that you find more engaging. And I also said, like, hey, it was a bit rough with the jet lag and moving temporarily to a new country and all sorts of issues that comes with that. So it was difficult for me to produce a good episode, but I made a commitment to make an episode per week. And the same thing can be applied to, okay, I want to learn a language or I want to do something new. These models and these opportunities like Cursor AI allow you to learn faster, allow you to try new things. And breaking down the barrier of entry and to just get started. You won't be making anything crazy, but you will have an opportunity to learn from doing, which I think is huge. Because I learned a lot about Go just in these last couple hours. In these last couple hours, I learned quite a bit, and I probably wouldn't have learned that much and been as engaged as I was if I wasn't using Cursor. Because obviously I wouldn't have been able to make this project in under 4 hours, and I wouldn't have been able to learn that much stuff because I wouldn't have been able to do. I'd be more reading and learning from that end. And I'm not saying that the foundations aren't important, but I think foundations mixed with doing is better. Like I would rather do something and then read about the foundations and then do it again with new information. But if you're just reading foundations, you don't necessarily get any practical knowledge, which I think is important. And if you weren't familiar with Go, I'll just spend a couple minutes on Go and then we'll close out the episode. So Go was created at Google by Robert Glazemir, Rob Pike, and Ken Thompson. It was created for reliability, scalability, and is mostly used for cloud infrastructure or APIs. The reason why Go was created is because Go is described as like a brutalist language. There isn't much freedom, but there isn't anything extra, right? So like Go doesn't like when you have your own little style of coding. It doesn't like when you try to do stuff that's fancy and pretty. Go is like very concise, to the point, simple. Like that's Go. You don't have a lot of developer freedom. And so it's good for large companies that have to maintain large code bases, because if you have all this developer freedom, then it's hard to keep the code standardized across all these different departments and people managing different parts of the code base. But with Go, it makes it a lot easier, which is really cool. It's known for its scalability, obviously. I said that earlier. But they use Go for their cloud infrastructure. A lot of their apps are built with Go, and a lot of their back end is built with Go. I'm not sure the percentage, but I know that they do report on it. But I know there's a big effort to replace a lot of their apps with Go, and not their mobile apps, but like their enterprise apps. Because originally, I think they built a lot of stuff in Python, but Python is fast to iterate, but obviously a lot slower than Go, because Go is a compiled language, while Python is an interpreted language. And what that means is when you run Go, everything's ran at the same time and it's compiled, which makes it have faster execution speeds. And so it's way, way, way faster than Python. And the only way that Python can achieve not even close results, but faster results is things are built in C, I think C++. And then they are compiled into what's called a library. And then that library is utilized by users using Python. So like they'll have a Python library, and that Python library will be used, but that Python library was really compiled in C++, and then it's used on top of the Python library in Python. So it's running much faster than it would normally run in Python, but it's definitely not as fast as it could be if you were running in C++. And then there's like Go, which is going to be way faster than Python. So with that being said, what's the difference between an interpreted language and a compiled language? As I said, compiled languages are a lot faster, but harder to iterate on because you have to run the whole program at once. And I think they might be making changes to that later on. Like, I don't know, you could probably set up your app in a certain way to remove that ability. I don't know. I haven't done that much research with GoLang, but maybe there's a way. But typically, like you run the whole thing and then it's compiled and ran. And so it's really fast and efficient and scalable, right? But to iterate on it, it's a bit slower because in Python, you can make a little change to your code base, like 2 lines, 3 lines, and you could run those 3 lines. And then you're like, that didn't work. And then you could run it again and you get it to work. But with Go, you have to run the whole thing. So if you have a large program, a large app, you have to wait for it to compile every time. So those are like the differences. I think that there's pros and cons to both approaches. I wanted to try something different. I wanted to do GoLang because I've always been curious about GoLang because of the integration with some of Google's products. I am like a serious fanatic of Google. The only thing I don't have that's not Google is like I think a Chromebook, which I would like to have a Chromebook eventually. I think if I have a maxed out home PC and then a nice Chromebook for my mobile activities, I think that would be a pretty decent setup. That was Go. And that was the reason why I did GoLang. So I've always been curious about Go, and mostly is because of Google's influence on me as a technologist and programmer, because they have a large open source initiative. So they open source a lot of their languages, their models, they have plenty of classes you could take online. They have certificates like for security, for infrastructure, for Scrum Master. They have so much stuff and they do so much. And they also sponsored a program at my undergrad university that I was a part of, the Google Cloud Developers, where they give you, $1,000+ worth of cloud credits to mess around with. And so they do a lot for developers and like harnessing talent and being a part of the world in that regard and pushing the world forward. So I really appreciate things that they do. So, and also Meta as well. But we're talking about Google right now. But that's the main reason why I did GoLang. I wanted to try it out. I thought it was really cool. I loved the language, how simple it is. You could definitely see it as a learning curve where it's very strict, but once you get going, I think it'd be pretty decent. Okay, so recapping the episode, Cursor AI's capabilities and the potential impact. The potential impact, I think I didn't touch on as much, but I more or less emphasized it. Like it makes things a lot easier to be a developer. I think it's way faster than doing it a different way. And I didn't really buy into a lot of the hype of Cursor. I saw it over Twitter or X. Some people were talking about it, and I looked it up online, and people are like, yeah, it's not that much different. I don't really see any point of it. I used it. It's not that good. And then what really spiked my interest was one of my colleagues, Jimmy, was talking about how he built an app and he refactored his code for an app that we built a while back. He refactored it, and he said it runs way faster than it used to run. And he used it to create another app. And he's like, man, like Cursor is like insane. Like it's so good. Like you have to try it out. And so here I am. I built the GoLang app, and that was one of the main reasons was because he was emphasizing how good it was, and it was showing me all the features. I was like, wow, that is pretty legit. So I made this episode to discuss the abilities of Cursor, but I think the impact is clear, so I didn't touch on it as much. But just to go over the capabilities, Cursor is a fork of VS Code, so it's basically VS Code, which I think, in my opinion, is like one of the best code editors, for definitely best open source code editor. And the features are you can select which foundation model you want to use. If you have premium, you can use a certain amount of credits for free. I think you can use like 100 credits or something like that a month or a day. I don't really know the whole pricing as part of Cursor. I know you could use it for free, like quite a bit of credits. I know that Jimmy, when he was building all those things, he did the free version, so you don't need the premium version. But he was like, I'm going to use it so much now that I am going to get the premium. I use the premium because it's a lot easier for me just to get it started. I want to talk about all the features when I have this episode, so I spend the $20 and talk about them, and then I'll cancel at the end of the month. But yeah, you have the ability to select foundation models. You could do inline edits of your code. You can refactor your code base. You can ask it questions about the code. It can answer for you. You can select information, what you want your context information to be. You could select which files, select multiple files. You can select files that are outside of your project. You could select things from the web. Not things from the web, but you can access stuff from the web and bring it in. You can get documentation from Cursor. I mean, there's just so much stuff. It's very useful, so useful. Like the things that you always have to do as a developer is you have to have clean code, clean concise code. You have to optimize it depending on the process. Like what is it used for? I think it depends. A lot of times when you're writing stuff, you want it to be fast, but sometimes you don't really care because you don't have to run it that often, and you'd rather it be clear and have better usability and readability than optimizing it. But now you can optimize it for basically for free. And then another thing that you have to do as a developer is you have to write documentation. Now you can do that for free. And so there's all these activities that would take up a lot of time that you no longer have to do anymore, which I think is great. And then it can help you write the code as well. So it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. It's so good. I think it's great. And the capabilities it would have in like a year and a half from now, really, really, really exciting stuff. It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. And so what do you think about this Cursor AI? Do you think that we should pay developers less now or something like that? I don't know. I think they should get paid the same, but they definitely would have to do more work eventually. And I think that's going to be the next struggle. Okay, well now you're an AI enabled developer. You should be producing 3x, 4x what you used to be able to do. But it doesn't work out that way. So, but yeah, like, have you used Cursor AI? Are you curious about it? And if so, please share down below. Next week, I am going to talk about the scary truth of reflection 70 billion parameter model. It turns out that this model was not legitimate. And so there was a lot of news reporting. There was a lot, when I say news, like the tech community was head over heels about this new model. And it turned out to be a fake, which is great because I delayed doing an episode. I wanted to do an episode on the model, but then I delayed it because I didn't want to get burned potentially, because I was like, wait, this is like so much better than everything else. And it just came out of nowhere. I don't think so. That's not how it's worked. So I think that I made the right decision to wait and hold, and potentially you got your news somewhere else, but I didn't talk about it because of that potential issue. It's like, this seems kind of fishy. And so I'll talk about it next episode, and I'll do some research and kind of discuss the whole situation with you. And so you'll be informed, but quite crazy. And I can't wait. to talk about it. Okay. So wherever you are in this world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I appreciate you listening to this episode, and I hope that you'll listen in next week. Appreciate your support. Goodbye.